We are jumping in the Father Almighty, Jesus Christ.
He among you who is without sin, let him cast the first stone.
Theodosius, who specifically mentions a church marking the spot where Jesus was believed to have been baptized. The Gospel of Matthew, and this provides our only historical account of one of the most mysterious journeys in religious history ever. This is the flight of Jesus and his family to Egypt. The ruins of Caesarea Philippi. There are excavations that have been done recently that have uncovered the remains of a great temple dedicated to Pan. It was here, in the shadow of this pagan religious center, that Peter made his famous declaration about the identity of Christ. It's Jacob's well. This is the actual place that Christ was. So, we're going through everything. And where he went in his travels back in the day. This episode's got everything. So let's jump in. What's up, people, and welcome back to Religion Camp. Welcome to my tent. My name is Mark Gagnon, and this is the show where we explore the most interesting, fascinating, controversial stories from every religion from around the world, from all time ever in the universe. Thank you for joining me. I truly appreciate it. I'm joined by my friend Christos on the ones and twos, on the dials over there on the sticks. How are you, Christos?
Doing well.
All right, enough. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody that checked out the videos on Sikhism and the Ark of the Covenant. Just really cool feedback, both from Sikh people, but also folks not of that faith background. This one dude, who is this? EFGABCD. That's a trash username. He said he was homeless for 2 days in the UK and went to a Gurudwara. I always mess up how to pronounce it. I'm going to say it how I think it should be said. Gurdwara in Manchester, and they gave him food for free for a couple days without charging him any money. So just goes to show that these good folks are out there. And then the Ark of the Covenant episode, just all sorts of people giving great feedback. Again, why do I do this show? Why am I so interested in religion? I, was raised very religious in the Catholic faith, one true holy Catholic and apostolic church. Sorry, everybody. But also, I think it is the greatest way, in my opinion, to connect with people and culture. I'm fascinated by people. I'm fascinated by who they are, what they believe. And I don't think it's possible to truly understand a people, an ethnic group, or even a nation without understanding the God that they worship, right? I mean, most of my Muslim friends, like the ones that practice diligently, Islam is the most important thing in their life. So without knowing anything about Allah or the Prophet, how can you be like, oh yeah, I know what my Muslim friends are about? And once you contextualize the culture and the people through, the way they orient themselves through the religion and what they were told dogmatically or culturally growing up, then you can really get a sense for who they are. So today is going to be no different because we have a very fascinating topic. We are jumping in to the legend, the OG, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, Jesus Cristo, Jesus Christ, the prophet in Islam, the savior in Christianity, and, just a legend to everyone else. And where he went in his travels back in the day. You probably know, all right, Jesus, born in Bethlehem, went to Nazareth, popped into, going around different places in Judea, right? That's probably what you heard in Sunday school. But the story goes much deeper. Things that I didn't even realize. So we're going through everything, including even some modern cutting-edge archaeology, ancient texts, and a healthy dose of conspiracy. So this episode's got everything. So let's jump in. We're going all the way to Bethlehem, and it's recorded in the Gospel of Luke, and it begins at the Roman census. So there you have it on the screen. You got Bethlehem right there at the bottom, and that is where it all starts for our boy. So this happens under the governorship of Quirinius in Syria, but it presents an interesting historical puzzle off rip, as Luke's timing appears to conflict with Matthew's account, placing Jesus' birth during Herod the Great's reign, which ended between 5 BC and 1 AD. And the intersection of this Roman administrative history and the biblical narrative gives our first glimpse into just the massive complexity of piecing together ancient historical events with the records that we still have. Bethlehem, for the record, I think it's important to point out, holds a profound significance in ancient Jewish tradition. So the prophet Micah, maybe you heard of him, he referred to it as being, quote, small among the clans of Judah, yet marked it as the prophesied birthplace of a future ruler. Just saying. So this small town, about 6 miles south of Jerusalem, already kind of like earned its place in Jewish history as the birthplace of King David. So that's pretty important. I mean, the Bible does this, the Torah, and many other ancient texts where there's all sorts of prophecies where the scholars and prophets of old will kind of call their shot, point to the future, and say this is going to happen. So, of course, if King David is from Bethlehem, you can imagine Jesus being the new David of the bloodline of David will then also be from the same place. And Micah says it's going to be the birthplace of a future ruler, which has to improve, like, property value, right? Like if you're moving into like a district, like you have to fight tooth and nail to get into a good district in New York City. Imagine you're moving to a district, the real estate agent's like, yeah, technically the next king will be born in this area. So just keep that in mind. You basically put yourself in the lottery for untold power, maybe even being the savior of the universe. I'm just saying. You think that the real estate agent would pepper that in. To like open floor plan, HOAs, super, super easy, and your kid could be Jesus. So I'm just saying, if I was back in the day, that's what I'd be doing. Make that into an HGTV show. Stat. Anyway, archaeological evidence from the late 1st century BC and even into the early 1st century AD shows us a settled agricultural community, folks out there just farming, having some cattle. And although the exact size during the period of this, area of Bethlehem is still kind of up for scholarly discussion, some debate, if you will. The most tangible historical marker that we have today is the Church of the Nativity. This was constructed 326 AD under Emperor Constantine and his mother Helena. The church, one of the oldest continuously operating Christian churches in the entire world, was built to mark the traditional site of Jesus' birth. While the structure itself, kind of post-dates the actual events by about, 3 centuries, right? The representation of the location in early Christian tradition about the birthplace is considered credible enough to warrant some type of imperial patronage. The Gospel of Luke tells us that when Mary and Joseph arrived, they found, quote, no place for them at the inn, as you probably heard in a couple songs. Luke 2, chapter 2, verse 7. You can check it out there. This detail has, again, sparked considerable debate about the nature of accommodation and what the Airbnb situation was like in the 1st century Bethlehem. Archaeologists from modern times that have gone back have gone through, and in this period, there's evidence that your typical Judean home often had space for guests, usually upper rooms or some type of attached facility. And the word translated as inn, it comes from kataluma in Greek. How's my pronunciation, Christos?
Not bad.
All right, enough. And this could also refer to a guest room in a private home, suggesting potentially an even more nuanced picture than our traditional understanding of like a ramada. So probably not a ramada back in the day. I mean, again, I don't know. No one really knows, but it seems like it's more likely just like, an efficiency, a place that like a Cuban 20-year-old would live with his parents, just like a little side house type vibe. And the historical context of the journey is, again, really important for understanding the significance, right? So this was a period of Roman administrative control over Judea, with imperial power extending into the daily lives of its subjects through mechanisms like, a census and stuff like that. Again, if you were under the sort of occupation by the Romans, and you're a person that lives in Judea, you don't necessarily have the same rights, you could say, as a proper Roman citizen in Rome. So this is also a pivotal moment in history because this is a time of intense messianic expectation amongst the Jewish population and the high priests of the area. There's tons of prophetic traditions converging on Bethlehem as, this site of religious significance. So, what route would you have taken to Bethlehem during this pivotal moment? Well, that's where we go to the Gospel of Matthew. And this provides our only historical account of one of the most mysterious journeys in religious history ever. This is the flight of Jesus and his family to Egypt. So, according to Matthew chapter 2, verses 13 to 15, an angel appeared to Joseph in a dream, warning him to flee with Mary and Jesus to escape King Herod's wrath. What followed was a journey that would later be remembered as one of the 7 sorrows of Mary within Catholic tradition, although the historical details remain, unfortunately, pretty sparse. So let's examine what we actually know about the political climate that spurred this hasty departure. All right, so you got Herod the Great, this guy, which, in my opinion, not so great. Kind of a misnomer. I mean, if you have to put great in your name, you're probably a piece of shit. Hot take.
Alexander the Great?
I mean, I guess it depends who you ask, right? If you ask the people of, I don't know, Alexandria that he slaughtered, I guess he did a lot of conversion and kind of like let them do their thing. All right, regardless, you get my point. So, Herod the Great, this, again, this is from contemporary historical sources that confirm this, was notorious for his paranoid brutality. So many of these despots and dictators become so paranoid. I mean, Stalin infamously was like the most paranoid dude in the world. Matter of fact, Stalin dies because he tests his men. He's inside his chambers, and there are guards on the outside of his room, and he's testing them. And he basically is like, doing these tests where he'll like yell for help, and they'll come in, and then he'll punish them for trying to help. And then eventually, bro has a heart attack. He's yelling inside his room. He's like calling for help, and the guards go, "We're not going in there because we've been punished before." So you get what you get. But he was so paranoid. He was like, "I don't want anyone coming in my room ever, under any circumstance." And that's ultimately what killed him. So Herod, similarly, equally as paranoid. The Jewish historian Josephus documents how Herod executed several of his own sons and his beloved wife, Mariam, leading Emperor Augustus to reportedly quip that it was, quote, better to be Herod's pig than his son. This is a pointed reference, as you can imagine, to Herod's observance of Jewish dietary laws while showing basically no restraint to murdering his own boys. And this context, I think, is important because it lends credibility to Matthew's account of the family's urgent flight from Herod's jurisdiction. So the presence of Jewish communities in Egypt during this period is well documented, particularly in Alexandria and the Nile Delta region. Archaeological evidence and a lot of contemporary writings confirm substantial Jewish settlements in this area at this time, making Egypt a logical refuge for a Jewish family to, seek safety. However, it's also important to note that the biblical account doesn't specify which Egyptian community may have hosted the Holy Family or how long they stayed, or really any other major details. Matthew simply states, quote, he stayed there until the death of Herod. What's up, guys? We're going to take a quick break because I have great news. Religion Camp has merch. That's right. We have amazing t-shirts like this one you see here and this one. We got hats, all sorts of very interesting designs, not only for Christianity, the one I was raised in, but for all religions: Hinduism, Sikhism, Islam, Judaism, Mormonism. I actually don't know if we have a Mormonism shirt, but maybe we can work on that if we got any, Latter-day Saints trying to cop. Anyway, you can catch it all here at this link. We'll also have it in the description as well as the comments. Get that right now, and peace be with you. Alrighty, don't skip forward, guys, because I am on the road, world's fastest ad read, coming at you. I'm going to be at Buffalo, Raleigh, Poughkeepsie, Portland, Oregon, Fort Worth, Texas, Austin, Texas, Stanford, Philly, Levittown, Chandler, Arizona, San Diego. I'm also going to be adding Toronto, Montreal, as well as Washington, D.C., and a bunch of other dates. You can get all that at themarkagnon.com. Dates are in the description, also in probably the comments of this episode. Go see me on the road. Come hang out. I'll be hanging out with everyone after the show. Come shake my hand. Call me an idiot. Whatever you want to do, I will be there. Additionally, I will be doing my 1 hour of stand-up comedy. I'm very proud of this hour. I'm really excited to share it with you guys, and it would mean the world if everyone could come on out. And what do you wear to a show on the road? That's a great question. You can go to campgoods.co. That's right. We got merch. We got camp merch. We got hats, hoodies, t-shirts. A lot of stuff is out of stock. Things have been selling like hotcakes, but we're going to be restocking everything in all the sizes. So you can go there right now, get all the merch, get all the coolest clothing in the podcast game. We're going to be updating that site regularly. And if you come out to a show, I'd love to see you sporting some of the threads that we got up online. I will see you guys there. Let's get back to the show. While traditional routes between Judea and Egypt existed, including, the ancient Via Maris, aka the Way of the Sea, and that connected Egypt with a lot of the, northern territories, we cannot definitively state which path the family took. The Via Maris, well documented in archaeological records and all that stuff, would have provided a possible route, but claiming any specific itinerary goes far beyond any type of historical or biblical evidence. What we do know from the archaeological findings is that this period saw a ton of travel and trade between Judea and Egypt, making a journey challenging but completely feasible and possible even in that time. Matthew frames this journey as the fulfillment of a prophecy from the book of Hosea, for chapter 11, verse 1, quote, "Out of Egypt I called my son." This scriptural connection would have had a deep significance for Matthew's obviously Jewish audience, deliberately paralleling the Exodus narrative. And archaeological evidence from this period shows continued cultural and religious connections between Jewish communities in Judea and Egypt, suggesting that this kind of, parallel, this biblical parallel, you could say, would have resonated with a lot of the readers of that time. The historical reality of the Jewish refugees seeking safety in Egypt during political upheavals is also really well documented, right? I mean, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph were not the only ones. So, though we have no specific archaeological evidence of Jesus' family among them. If we could pull up a map again, I would actually be curious to see how far that is. So this is Galilee right there. We have Nazareth, and then you got to go all the way down Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and then Egypt is right down there. I mean, that's a bit of a hike, if I do say so myself, right? Especially back in the day. No AC, no bodega. Just had to hoof it. So now we get to Nazareth. This is a funny place. It's actually hilarious. There's a verse in the Bible where they're talking about Jesus of Nazareth, and the guys are looking at each other and they're like, "What good has ever come out of Nazareth?" Like, it's just like, it's hilarious. It's like being like Jesus of Toledo. You're like, the savior's from Toledo, Ohio. And you're like, yeah, of course, why not? So in 2009, an archaeologist by the name of Yardena Alexandre made a discovery that transformed our understanding of Nazareth in this first century. So under a modern convent, her team uncovered what the Israel Antiquities Authority confirmed as a first century house. And this wasn't some grand structure. We're not talking about, some mansion with all sorts of, rooms and stuff. This is just a modest dwelling with a small room, a little courtyard, cut into the limestone bedrock. While we can't definitively say Jesus visited this specific house, it gives us a glimpse into the kind of home that he likely would have known with his mother and father. So as Alexandra herself noted, this may well have been a place that Jesus and his contemporaries were familiar with. Again, these are pretty small towns. So forget everything that you've seen in religious art. First century Nazareth wasn't the bustling town of all these traditional depictions. Archaeological evidence suggests a population of just 200 to maybe even 400 people at the top end. I mean, when Nathanael asks in John chapter 1, can anything good come from Nazareth? He's not just being, snarky. The archaeological record supports this. I mean, it's like a nothing town. It's truly, 400 people. It's like so small. So Nazareth was tiny, even by ancient standards. And the entire settlement was smaller than, like a high school graduating class. I mean, how many people graduate in your high school, Christos?
4,000. I had a big one.
That was your graduating class?
Oh, no, 4,000 kids in a class, so 1,000 theoretically would have.
That's what I'm saying. So the people that graduated with you, think about that. It was half that. Less than half. I mean, that's crazy. So sometimes you see these pictures of Jesus in Nazareth, and there's like, donkeys and all this stuff. I mean, there's probably a donkey. And that was Fat Susie from up the block. It wasn't even a real donkey. It was just a girl. It's crazy. So you can think about, putting in that perspective. So a lot of the recent excavations revealed kind of a network of these like small dwellings, these kind of like agricultural terraces, kind of some storage caves, painting a picture of this sort of, modest agricultural community, you could say. And the archaeological evidence tells us a really interesting story about, daily life for just a average, Nazarethian citizen. So they were primarily farmers and craftsmen. Excavations have, uncovered some wine presses, olive presses, and some storage silos carved into the limestone. And these findings align perfectly with the gospel accounts that describe Joseph as a carpenter, known in the traditional Greek as a tekton, but more accurately meaning like a craftsman or a builder. But it's, commonly accepted that he was a carpenter. So the limestone quarries and caves around Nazareth would have provided, ample materials to do this type of building work. One of the most significant discoveries from the first century is these, they're known as mikveh in the Hebrew. And this is a ritual bath carved into the bedrock. And these are actually still used in a lot of, Jewish communities to this day. And this finding is crucial because, again, it provides this physical evidence of Jewish religious observance in Nazareth at this time. So according to Jewish law, the mikvot, which is the plural of the mikvah, were essential for maintaining this type of ritual purity. The presence of these, constructed baths with, the steps and the water collection system shows that despite the small size of Nazareth, this was a community deeply committed to this Jewish religious practice. And perhaps the most, revealing or telling element is what the archaeologists haven't found. No public buildings, no paved streets, no signs of Hellenistic or, Roman architecture, any of that stuff. As the archaeologist Ken Dark notes in his research, Nazareth appears to have been an intentionally conservative Jewish settlement that maintained its cultural isolation despite being just a few miles from this, kind of bustling Greco-Roman city of Sepphoris. And the archaeological evidence challenges our assumptions about, Jesus's early environment, right? Rather than growing up in this kind of cosmopolitan setting, he spent his formative years in a traditional Jewish village that seemed to almost resist the surrounding Hellenistic culture. And this context, I think, adds some layers and kind of fleshes out our understanding of who Jesus was. And I think actually kind of contextualizes his later ministry. When he would repeatedly, cross these cultural and religious boundaries in ways that shocked a lot of his contemporaries. But who knows? Maybe this is completely overthinking it, right? You have this, skilled craftsman who simply walked a few miles from this bustling Greco city of Sepphoris, carved his own little quiet space in the limestone, added a little bath, called it home, right? It's possible. Sometimes the simplest explanation for a small town's beginning is just, a young man needing his own space. Though in this case, that desire for independence may have, changed the course of history forever. So let's move on, shall we? Baptism in the wilderness, aka John the Baptist. The gospel accounts place Jesus' baptism at a very specific location in the Jordan River. Yet today, two sites kind of compete for recognition of this pivotal moment. You have the Al-Makdas in Jordan and then the Qasr al-Yahud in the West Bank. The existence of these competing sites offers us kind of an interesting window into sort of how history and archaeology and the evidence that, of these, notable moments kind of intersect in, kind of the historical documents and the traditions and help us inform, the way that we actually revere these types of locations. So the Al-Makdas, meaning the place of immersion in Arabic, has yielded significant archaeological evidence. Excavations revealed a Byzantine church dating to the 5th or 6th century AD, complete with marble columns, mosaic floors, water system connecting to the river. Matter of fact, UNESCO, which is kind of like this governing body for declaring these famous sites in the world, these historical sites, declared it a World Heritage Site, noting the presence of these baptismal pools and caves and these water collection systems that align with a lot of the early Christian pilgrim accounts. And the earliest written description comes from Theodosius around 530 AD, who specifically mentions a church marking the spot where Jesus was believed to have been baptized. But across the river, you have Qasr el-Yahud, which also presents some compelling evidence. Archaeological excavations uncover multiple layers of religious structures, including the remains of a Byzantine-era monastery. And the site, and the location of the site aligns with a lot of the biblical descriptions of being near Bethany beyond the Jordan. This is from the book of John. Although it's important to note that the exact location of this ancient Bethany, again, is debated among scholars, as you can imagine. The Israel Antiquities Authority has documented continuous pilgrim activity at this site from at least the 4th century AD. So following the baptism, the gospel records show Jesus' retreat into the wilderness for 40 days. And archaeological surveys of the Judean desert have identified numerous sites that were inhabited during the 1st century CE or AD. These include caves, settlements used by different religious groups, specifically and including the Essene Jews. These are the folks that preserved the Dead Sea Scrolls. So the discovery of these Dead Sea Scrolls and the excavations of Qumran provided this really important context about the religious practices and the settlements of the region during Jesus' time. But it's important to note, we can't definitively identify specific locations from this period in history. But the archaeological evidence from both the baptismal sites and the surrounding wilderness helps us understand the kind of historical environment of these events. So the Jordan River, for example, has, shifted, and like the course of the river itself has actually changed over the centuries. And its water level has significantly decreased, but these geological studies help us reconstruct the first century path. Both competing baptismal sites have produced pottery, coins from the Roman period. Again, all sorts of different artifacts that kind of confirm that there was human activity in the area during the time of Christ. The wilderness area preserves numerous Roman-era paths and small settlements showing how even these desolate areas supported these, religious communities and even just regular civilian life. So, I don't know. I'd love to see a map here so even just looking at the map here, I mean, they're so close. They're basically in the same exact spot, right? Like, they're on opposite sides of the river. Come on, dude. You got to just be like, yeah, that's all right. It's the same, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, if I got hit by a car on the street and you'd be like, oh, where did you get hit by a car? I'd be like, oh, in the middle of the street. And they'd be like, oh, well, was it on this side of the street or that side of the street? I'd be like, dude, it's in the I'm telling you, it's in the street. I mean, that's crazy. So I think they're both right. I'm going to give it to both of them. You guys get to split it. You guys, if someone takes the top part, I'm going to split it up King Solomon style. What's up, people? Quick announcement. If you are a fan of Camp Gagnon or Religion Camp, I have great news because we are dropping History Camp. That's right. This is the channel where we're going to be exploring the most interesting, fascinating, controversial topics from all time throughout all history. Right? You probably know about Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, Nikola Tesla. Interesting figures from history, and you probably learned about them in school and they were pretty boring, but not here. No. As you know, I was raised by a conspiracy theorist, so I'm going to be diving deep into all of the interesting, strange, occult, and secretive societal relationships that all of these famous, influential men from our shared past have. So if you're interested, please go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It will be pinned in the description as well as the comments. And if you're on Spotify, this doesn't really apply to you, but these episodes will be dropping as well. Just go ahead and give us a high rating because it really helps the show.
Here is a bulletin.
Imagine this. You're 30 feet underground, digging through frozen earth with spoons and mess hall plates. Nazi guards patrol overhead. One wrong move, one loose pebble, and it's over. But on this night in 1944, 76 Allied prisoners would attempt the impossible, tunneling their way to freedom in the largest prisoner of war escape of World War II. And centuries earlier, in a cold stone chamber, a teenage girl in armor stood before her accusers. Her crime? Leading armies, speaking to angels, and daring to challenge the most powerful men in Europe. Joan of Arc's trial would become one of history's most infamous moments. These are just two stories from Today in History, the newsletter that brings you the most fascinating events from the past, delivered fresh to your inbox. From epic wars to religious rebellions, ancient mysteries to modern marvels. Don't miss another piece of history. Scan the QR code now or click the link in the description to sign up for Today in History.
So this now takes us to Galilee. And a lot of the archaeological evidence from Galilee provides really interesting insights into the landscape of where Jesus established his ministry. So the remains of Capernaum, these might be the most impressive. It includes a first century synagogue basalt foundation stones beneath a later limestone structure. So according to the gospel accounts, this little town on a lake became Jesus' primary base of operations after leaving Nazareth. Archaeologists have uncovered this extensive village, including what many scholars later identify as Peter's house, a structure later converted into a church in the Byzantine era. So the question of this place known as Cana, this is the place where Christ performs his first miracle, and the actual location of that miracle is kind of this very strange, fascinating archaeological puzzle. So you have two primary candidates that emerge from excavation. You have Khirbet Kana and Kafir Kana. At Khirbet Kana, archaeologists have uncovered a first century stone vessel and wine producing facilities, while at Kafir Kana, which traditionally held the strongest claim, in the Gospel of John, chapter 2, verse 1, this places the wedding feast miracle here. and archaeological evidence confirms both sites were inhabited during Jesus' time. However, the exact location remains, a debate. It would be sick if you get married there to this day, right? For anyone that's not familiar, there's obviously the miracle at the wedding of Cana, where, Christ turns water into wine. I mean, if that was a wedding venue today, that shit would go crazy. Kind of a good idea.
Me getting married at all would be a miracle.
That would be a miracle, but I believe in our Savior Jesus Christ. But even for him, can God move a rock so big he can't move it or whatever? You might be a rock that he made that's too big. We'll have to see, but I'll be there. I'll be first in line. Anyway, the discovery of Bethsaida's remains. This was discovered at Et Tal, near the Sea of Galilee on the northern shore, revealed a fishing village that transformed into this Hellenistic Roman town. And excavations have uncovered fishing implements and anchors and, fish processing facilities, all this kind of stuff that confirms the gospel account's description of the character of this place. The site also has, temples and residential quarters and a city gate system, suggesting that it was potentially even more developed than previously thought. And the distances between these locations offer, again, more perspective on the sort of landmass that Jesus' ministry actually covered. From Capernaum to Bethsaida is approximately like 5.5 miles along the lakeshore. And archaeological surveys have identified Roman-era roads connecting these settlements, including portions of the Via Maris trade route that, passed through the region that we talked about earlier. And the discovery of this road network shows how Jesus and his followers could have moved efficiently between these different, populated little villages. The first century traveler typically covered like 20 to 25 kilometers per day on foot, meaning that most journeys between these Galilean towns could have been completed, within a day. And the Sea of Galilee itself, around which a lot of these, settlements and, villages kind of clustered, plays a crucial role in connecting these communities. Archaeological remains of harbors, fishing boats, including the remarkably preserved first century Jesus boat discovered in 1986. And also like these fish processing plants demonstrate kind of how important this lake was to the life of the region. It kind of made everything survive. And the compact nature of the region combined with, the road network and the maritime connections explains how Jesus' teaching could spread rapidly through this area known as Galilee. Perhaps the most fascinating element of the travels of Christ is his journey into the territories of Tyre, Sidon, and Caesarea Philippi. And this represents, a really, really strange part of his ministry that I never really considered. So the Gospel of Mark, your boy, kind of records his travel to the region of Tyre and Sidon, which are these major Phoenician cities with this like pagan population. And again, when I say pagan, I just mean folks that believed in, potentially a polytheism or many different gods. I think today pagan has kind of like almost like a satanic connotation, but these are typically just non-Jews of the region that kind of worshipped a litany of different gods, kind of a pantheon of worship. You could think of it as that way. And the archaeological excavations of this time reveal that there were these sophisticated urban centers during the first century. While Tyre's famous, purple dye industry that the Phoenicians became, extremely famous for, and Sidon's extensive trade networks, are well documented through not only, accounts of historians and record keepers of the time, but also material remains that we found today. But the ruins of Caesarea Philippi, known today as Banias, offer striking evidence of the region's religious landscape. So there are excavations that have been done recently that have uncovered the remains of a great temple dedicated to Pan and the imperial cult, sort of the Roman gods. And this was built by Herod Philip in the first century. And the site features numerous sort of, little niches carved into the cliff face that once housed, statues. And this is even like a massive like temple platform that would have dominated like the landscape when Jesus actually went there. According to Matthew chapter 16, it was here in the shadow of this pagan religious center that Peter made his famous declaration about the identity of Christ. The archaeological records demonstrate, again, this massive trade network connecting all these regions from the first century, Roman era roads, and these different way stations that have been discovered, indicating this regular travel and commerce between the Jewish and Gentile territories of the time. Excavations again show coins and pottery and all sorts of different artifacts that are consistent with this type of cultural exchange. And despite these different boundaries, it seems like there was a friendly commerce that happened between them. And this evidence challenges the notion of like these sort of rigid, separate, Jewish and Gentile states in this region of the first century that many historians back in the day used to believe. And a lot of contemporary sources, again, sources of the time around the life and death of Christ, including Josephus, describe these northern territories as these multicultural zones where Jews and Phoenicians and Greeks and Syrians interacted regularly. Archaeological findings support this picture as well, revealing multilingual inscriptions and a lot of different architectural styles and varied religious artifacts, all within the same sort of settlement and landmass. And the discovery of both Jewish and pagan religious items in a household, again, this suggests that there was some type of regular interaction between different cultural groups, and that, despite the religious restrictions of these two, different groups, there was some type of common cultural exchange. And the remains of a lot of these ancient harbors at Tyre and Sidon, along with the trade routes that connected them to Caesarea Philippi and the Galilean heartland, demonstrate how these different regions were so economically interdependent at this time. Again, modern archaeology has mapped extensive road networks, showing that, all of these places were connected, even in the time of Christ. Maybe one of the most famous, sort of features of Christ's ministry is a little artifact known as Jacob's Well, which is still accessible today in the crypt of a Greek Orthodox church in Nablus. It stands as one of the few sites where we can say with reasonable certainty this is the actual place that Christ was. Archaeological excavations confirm that this, has been in continuous use since at least the early Roman period, making it one of the rare sort of sites that has a physical connection to a specific gospel event. The depth of the well is measured at around 135 feet, which again matches the ancient descriptions and demonstrates the sort of sophisticated engineering of these early water systems. The archaeological remains at nearby Mount Gerizim tell a compelling story of Samaritan religious life. Excavations uncovered the ruins of this massive temple complex destroyed by John Hyrcanus around 111 or 110 BC. And the scale of these remains, including these mikvots, these ritual baths, admin buildings, and, the massive temple itself, demonstrated that the Samaritan community wasn't some insignificant sect, but a powerful religious group with their own sophisticated sort of cultural center. And the discovery of, thousands of coins and inscriptions of the site revealed this sort of wealthy, organized community. So, first century Jewish kind of Samaritan relations were kind of complicated. So again, this historian we talked about before, Josephus, he documents violent clashes between these communities, including an incident where Samaritans scattered human bones in the temple in Jerusalem to defile it. Archaeological evidence shows that both groups maintained these sort of separate ritual baths, water systems, religious centers, and temples, deliberately avoiding this shared usage. Yet, paradoxically, ceramic and coin evidence suggests that regular economic interactions between the communities actually still occurred, kind of showing that, prejudice and dislike kind of gets limited when, a little bit of cash is involved. And so these ancient water systems throughout Samaria reveal, a really sophisticated engineering achievement. There's surveys of the land that has been mapped to show aqueducts and cisterns and wells that sustained large populations of people through this water management. And, these kinds of systems often, crossed a lot of like the religious and ethnic boundaries that were put up, right? Because the same springs and aquifers served everybody. The water doesn't care what you are. So both Jewish and Samaritan communities relied on these water sources, creating this sort of contradiction between the theological separation and sort of this practical day-to-day life that they both relied on each other. And a lot of recent excavations revealed how these communities developed this water sharing agreement. So we have evidence from the Roman period showing that Samaria was far from a backwater region, right? Excavations in Sebastia, which is, ancient Samaria, have uncovered kind of a cosmopolitan city with Greek, Roman, and some local architecture. And archaeologists today suggest that, the region, despite this religious tension, functioned as a, crucial economic and cultural bridge between Judea and Galilee. Again, I think understanding this historical context is really important to, harken back to the Gospel of Luke and kind of give context to this idea of the Good Samaritan, this parable that a lot of people have heard. And again, Jesus uses this parable as, a way to answer a man's question about who his neighbor is and who he should be kind to. And he emphasizes that, true neighborly love transcends this social and ethnic boundary, right? And that, in the story, you have a traveler that's beaten and left for dead by these robbers, and a priest and a Levite, both like religious figures within the community. They pass by without helping. However, it's just a gosh darn Samaritan, a member of this group that is, traditionally at odds with the ancient Jews. He stops to help and tends to the man's wounds and, pays for his care. And the central message of this is that compassion and mercy should be extended to anyone in need, because it also can be extended to you when you need it. And this takes us to the final journey of Christ. So Jerusalem during the Passover in the first century was just a powder keg of religious and political tension. Again, archaeologists have discovered that the Temple Mount and the surrounding areas reveal how the city swelled, to many, many multiples of its normal population during these festivals, these big religious holidays. And these recent excavations of the first century kind of show the street network, particularly along the stepped street near the Pool of Siloam, show how the pilgrims would have made their way up to the temple. These streets, built by Herod the Great and maintained by Pontius Pilate, were engineered to handle these massive crowds, though perhaps not the kind of crowd that would soon accompany Jesus. The Pool of Bethesda, discovered in the 9th century, provides kind of like an archaeological confirmation of the gospel account. So you have these sort of 5 like covered porch structure type things that are described in John chapter 5. And this matches the archaeological remains precisely, particularly at the Pool of Siloam, uncovered in 2004, which reveals the exact features described in the ancient texts. These discoveries include the original steps where people would have gathered, this ritual bath for purification, this water system that connects to a local spring. The Mount of Olives actually is another crucial piece of this archaeological evidence of the first century and kind of the Jewish burial practices of the people of that time. So excavations have uncovered thousands of period tombs, these ritual baths, and olive presses that demonstrate the area's significance. So some of the findings show that this ridge was a major gathering point for pilgrims entering into Jerusalem, offering this beautiful, dramatic view of the temple, the same way that Jesus would have had when, he wept over the city, according to Luke's account. Bethany, located near the Mount of Olives on the eastern slope, has revealed layers of history through this archaeological investigation. While a lot of the Byzantine-era tombs are later than Jesus' time, excavations have uncovered first-century domestic structures and even some burial caves that match the Gospel's description of the village. The archaeological record shows that it was small but a prosperous community, likely supported by a lot of the pilgrims and the people that would actually go there for these big events. And the most compelling archaeological evidence comes from the Temple Mount itself. The massive stones of the western wall and the recent excavated ritual bath near the southern steps and the debris from the temple's destruction in 70 AD all testify to the tumultuous events of the period. These findings, again, can kind of give context as to why entering Jerusalem during Passover was dangerous, right? The city was not just crowded, but it was packed with all sorts of religious and political fervor against the Roman rule, all centered around the temple that Herod had rebuilt. So that is basically everything that we know from the biblical account. This is not going to get into, the Mormons saying that Jesus went to, America, or maybe some of the other folks that suggest that Jesus had actually gone to India during his younger years, because it's so hard to get any type of documented evidence that support those types of claims. Mormonism, I don't know as well, to be honest with you. That actually would be a great topic for an episode that I would love to dive into. I'd be curious, why do they think that Jesus came to America? Let's just do a quick little search. So, yeah, I guess the Mormon account comes from the Book of Mormon itself, that after the resurrection of Christ, he appeared to people in America. Is that more or less what it is?
Pretty much.
We got to do a deep dive. Because who am I to say that's not what happened? You know what I mean? I believe Jesus resurrected, came back from the dead. Has it possibly popped over to America? I guess I have to jump in to find out. Maybe a topic for a new episode. I'm curious, what did you guys think? What do you think of the travels of Christ? Did he make it to India? Did he go to America? Or did he just stay in this, little region of the Middle East that we now know today? I'd be curious to know. Let me know your thoughts. Please drop a comment below. And, shout out to all the people that helped Jesus, escape King Herod and, all that stuff. He popped into a spot in Egypt. Shout out to them. They need to get a little bit more respect for that. And if you have any suggestions for a future video or a topic you would love to see that maybe talks about your faith, maybe an obscure thing about someone else's faith that you don't understand, or anything else from any religion from all time, from around the world, I would love to know. Drop it in the comments. I'll be reading all of them. And this has been another episode of Religion Camp. Peace be with you.
If you've made it to the end of this episode, you are clearly someone who understands that beneath every historical event lies a deeper truth waiting to be uncovered. You're the type of person who knows that real history is more fascinating than any fiction, and we deeply appreciate that about you. I'll be honest. That's exactly why I personally invite you to sign up for Today in History, our free newsletter that goes beyond the surface of historical events. We dive into the stories that textbooks never told you, the secrets that challenge the course of nations, and the forgotten tales that deserve to be remembered. Let's continue this journey of discovery together. Take the conversation from your headphones into your inbox. Sign up now through the QR code or link in the description. Today in History, because every day holds a secret waiting to be revealed. Thank you for being part of our historical journey, and we'll see you next time.